tremendous inspiration. Don, Haunted Mansion's been inspiration for you too. It's a big piece of your life as well, right?
Yeah, like Tony, I was one of the kids outside the gates of Haunted Mansion for years, waiting for something to happen inside. And I was also one of the teenagers inside the dune buggies making out with my girlfriend. I was much younger then. But it was, it was hallowed ground. I mean, what you said is really right. When you're especially younger and you see that for the first time, it's amazing. And in the early 2000s, Disney had looked at its IP and the kind of properties it owned, and they said, well, we can actually make movies from some of the properties we own. So the first two that they greenlit were the Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion. And so Rob Minkoff, who I'd done Lion King with, and I had worked together, and I love Rob, and he's going to be here later tonight, actually, for a screening of Haunted Mansion. And we started working on it, and we're both in animation. I had come out of, I finished Beauty and the Beast and Emperor's New Groove and some of those films, and he had done Stuart Little, and we started by going over to Imagineering and going through the library and talking to anybody that we could talk to who had worked on it, and looking at the kind of mythology behind it, the storytelling behind it. And then the coolest thing that I possibly have ever done in my life at Disney is we went to the park at about 6 o'clock one morning and turned the lights on in the attraction and walked through it. And it was amazing and kind of humbling, because it is, for me anyway, it was kind of a humble setting. You look behind the scenes and it's plywood and it's blacklight paint and it's things that, to the eye might look very common. But then you turn the lights off and it's the coolest thing ever. So
like the stage right behind us.
It was just an amazing kind of theater of it all. So we hired a great production designer, John Meyer, who actually recently just did the production design on Mary Poppins Returns. Huge fan of Disney, and we built the whole mansion. We thought we can't really do this in an existing mansion, so we built it in sound stages. So everything on the screen in that film is on sound stages, except for the exterior, which we built on a ranch out in Santa Clarita. So if you live out in the Santa Clarita Valley, the Haunted Mansion lives out there too, or lived out there. So then we spent 3 months with Eddie Murphy, which is a topic for a whole other discussion, and had a good time making the movie.
There you go. So obviously it's such an important piece of Disney's history, because they wanted to make a movie out of that, like they did with Pirates of the Caribbean. One was absolutely amazing. And then, you had the great job on Haunted Mansion. You guys make sure, if you're at the gala tonight, to be there tonight, because it should be a ton of fun.
There's so much to talk about. It was intimidating too, because Pirates of the Caribbean with Johnny Depp came out right before Haunted Mansion, and Eddie Murphy's last movie was Pluto Nash, which was a great movie. Really, you should see it. But we did the best we could, and everybody strives incredibly hard to make these movies. And we had people like Rick Baker, who's an amazing guy. So part of the fun for me was just hanging out with people like Rick and our composer and some of our special effects guys, just to be able to kind of find out how they approached their stagecraft to turn it into this film. So it was a great experience in the end.
I just want to say those sets were incredible, and I'm glad to hear Mary Poppins was by the same guy. But we were going to bring the conservatory to Disneyland, because I always felt when you step into the dune buggies, you're kind of in a nowhere land. And we had that all mapped out, it fit perfectly. But then the movie came out.
Hope springs eternal. You try to make good movies, and sometimes they win, and sometimes they win less. There's so much I could say. The stairway, though, in Gracie Mansion, the stairway, we ended up shipping to the Disney MGM Studio Tour at the time down in Florida, and it's an attraction on one of the sound stages down there, because I just couldn't stand throwing that set in the dumpster. And that's what was going to happen. So we just called everybody I knew, and we ended up shipping a portion of that down to Walt Disney World.
Awesome. Right on. Well, Tom, you've been inspired quite a bit by this attraction too, and you really went deep in studying this thing too, as well.
Right. There's a shot right there. This is from the Big Green collection, he was one of the architects in the later part of the history of the Haunted Mansion. Bill Martin. Actually, a lot of people were involved, as you all know. And I was one of those kids, just to back up a little bit, also, you know, drooling on the gates of the Haunted Mansion back in the 60s and wondering when it was going to open.
For anybody who doesn't know, why is everybody standing out the gates drooling at it? Why couldn't they go in?
You know, it was, there were rumors already, you know, I think by like 65, 66, there were rumors that, you know, started to get out there, and they were persistent. You know, this was way before the internet, of course, before social media, but the rumors, I think a lot of it, at least, I grew up in Orange County, and there were Disney executives who, you know, lived around the neighborhood and whatever, and I think that might have had something to do, you know, with kids overhearing things at the dinner table and then exaggerating or whatever. But I think that was part of the whole mystique. You know, is it really going to open or not?
But being a sneaky kid, if you rode the train, see that a girder area there? The black area below it was open between the railroad tracks, and you knew as long as there was nothing in that space, the ride hadn't been built yet.
So fast forward to the end of the 70s, and I actually get a job at Walt Disney Imagineering, and I'm too busy really to be, you know, a detective or anything. And plus, at the time, it wasn't really cool to be, you know, too interested in Disney and, you know, to be a foamer and be working there at the same time. So, you know, I kind of, you know, just every now and then, if I had the opportunity to dig around, I'd dig around and you know, just kind of take notes of things or whatever. But after 35 years of being there, I had a folder of really cool information and stuff. So I am now retired, and I am going to do a book eventually on the archaeology of Disneyland. And my whole thing is about uncovering new information, not retelling the same stories over and over again that you've heard, but finding new people who are involved, new information, new stories, new anecdotes, and why, you know, obviously no one ever got hurt in there during those years, but that was part of the rumor mongering, was that it was so scary that, you know, someone had a heart attack or fell in a snake pit. There were so many rumors. Those were two. But why did that rumor persist? I always thought that was really interesting, that it was so strong and so persistent, and even showed up a little bit in newspapers from time to time. And I can swear even hearing something on TV about it one time on the news, and, you know, but obviously there was never anything in there built significantly, but things did happen in there. You know, there were workers that went in there from time to time, and the elevators were in there the whole time. And that was one of the reasons why they would have to go in there. They'd have to fine-tune the elevators, they would have to test them. There was actually an issue with them that they uncovered early, thankfully, that required some rework. So, you know, if you were backstage, you might see people coming in and out of that cavern that you just saw in there. And then in later years, it was actually a parade break area for the parade. It's where the parade went. Fantasy on Parade I can't remember what the route was, but it went through Frontierland, and then it would park in that big, it was basically a big garage for the parade. And so, you know, who knows what strange things might have, you know, occurred in there that might have started rumors. Anyway, this is a shot that, well, if you see my presentation tomorrow, you'll find out a little bit more about this shot. It's interesting. This is the graveyard. It's referred to as the South Graveyard, and this was originally going to be one of the exits to the attraction. And each exit was going to have 3 exits within that exit, because you were supposed to find your way out. So that's where that line came from. And this gentleman here is Dave Jacobs, who you may remember. And he's standing in front of one of the openings that's just right now in that picture. I think it's either a board that's painted black, but they had 3 of these little holes, little hamster holes. Coming up out of the Haunted Mansion. You were going to exit, you're going to have to find your way out in some sort of maze-like thing before that, and then eventually you would come out in this graveyard, and there'd be more fun little things in the graveyard. And the same goes for the other side. On the north side, that was also going to be an exit. This is when it was going to be a walkthrough, obviously. And this is a photo when they started building. Okay, so no one will believe this. I didn't believe it. I had one of those things where your memory is playing tricks with you, Tom. I left Disneyland. I went on a trip one time. I was really little, and as we were leaving Disneyland, this is 1969, April 69, because it was, you know, a birthday that we went to for a friend of mine. And we are leaving the park through the exit, and I see this building finally going up behind the chain link fence, which would be right where the Haunted Mansion would be. And it was still a skeleton of a building. And I'm like, oh, they're finally maybe going to do the Haunted Mansion. Then years later, I'm like, April 69, you are, you know, what are you smoking? There's only a couple more months left. Well, it was April. This picture is taken in either late March or early April. Wow. And they just worked fast back then.
And they built two of them at the same time because all the material, all the animation, everything was at WDI when I came there in '70, and they've been cycling to make sure it would last for Walt Disney World.
Right. Now this is the North Cemetery, the North Graveyard. It's already been filled up with dirt, so it actually goes down much lower, and you see two of they're referred to on the structural drawings as leave outs, which means don't pour concrete here, leave a hole. And so there were three of those leave outs on that side. The one that you see in the lower right-hand corner was eventually used to put the moving speed ramp up through, and so you exit through that little hole right there. But it very much was intended to be a walkthrough. It was going to be two separate walkthroughs. I've kind of seen chatter on some of the websites, you know, that kind of hypothesize whether or not, and people debate, you know, whether that is true or not, but I can tell you definitely it was going to be two separate walkthroughs. Each elevator would be dedicated to one walkthrough, and then each of those walkthroughs would exit in their respective graveyard. And they did a few drawings of that, including Carol Clark, the famous art director, who was the art director for Mary Poppins, was asked by Walt to work on this and lay out some of the rooms for this walkthrough version. And Yale Gracie was already buying, or he was specifying props for it. It really was going to open in 1964 or 65. They wanted it to open in 63. They were planning for it to open in 63. Yale Gracie was purchasing props. They were buying the glass for it in 1963, or at least big giant sample pieces of the glass. And Yale had his list. Carol Clark and Marvin Davis had done layouts for it. And even Maples started engineering some of the machinery that eventually ended up in the show. Now, whether they built the machinery, I would love to find out, and whether that informed what would eventually go inside of the attraction. So that's something I'm kind of in the middle of right now. So I've kind of snuck these four, even though they're from Vic Green's collection. There are many, many more. And I hope someday to get this into a book about not just the Haunted Mansion, but about the archaeology of Disneyland in general. It's going to have to wait because I'm doing another book before it that is a little bit more urgent, that will trace the original Imagineers, track down missing Imagineers who we've never heard of before. Because there's not just one sitting here next to me, there are many, many more that you've never heard of and that did amazing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said again, so you're doing the archaeology of Haunted Mansion presentation tomorrow at 4?
Tomorrow at 4.
Which stage?
I don't know. You tell me.
One of the stages. Look on your map there.
One of the stages at 4 o'clock. So I'll dive into this a little bit more, into the history. My focus on it is from the time they decided to do this house in this. Another great panel will be at the D23 on the Ken Anderson version from 1957 to, well, it's mostly 1957. I think it might have lingered on until 59. My focus is on this version with the New Orleans Square and all of that. And there's some interesting little surprises and twists and turns involved.